Hi there. I'm here with Jenny Eden Berk, coach, author, and speaker on mindful eating. And well, how would you categorize or clarify your work?
Yeah, so I'm an eating psychology coach and I also do body image mentoring. My book is about body image and I incorporate a lot of mindfulness techniques and um, self-efficacy and eating empowerment, things like that.
What brought you to this work?
So it's a long story, but I was a chronic dieter my whole life. Starting at a very young age, I really struggled with my weight. I looked different than other people in my family. My mom is a chef, actually, but she's also like really petite and really tiny. And we would have these like amazing meals, but I felt also like I got the message like you should love food and savor it and like have great food, but you better watch it too because you don't want to eat too much. So I got a lot of mixed messages about food growing up, and I definitely struggled with body image. And interestingly, we often like learn what we need. We often teach what we actually need to know ourselves. So I actually became a health educator at a national weight and health management company after getting my master's, which was in psychology and education. And for 13 years, I worked like an aggressive weight loss clinic, essentially, which was had a behavioral component and had a medical component. And I was running and facilitating classes, helping people to stay on this really rigid, restrictive diet, essentially, while they were also getting medical support through a team of nurses and doctors and so forth. And I'd also work one-on-one with them. And after about 10 years, I started to feel really out of alignment with what they were doing. And I really like drank the Kool-Aid. I was like, oh yeah, I'm all in. But I started to feel like, am I really helping people? Is this really helping people, or is it just putting a Band-Aid on a wound, And I started to wonder, like, what was the root cause of why people feel so called to overeat or to binge eat or to stress eat? Why is there such an epidemic in this culture? What is really at the root of that? And I became really obsessed with like going deeper. So I found this program called the Institute for the Psychology of Eating, which it was like I saw it and like the skies parted, and I was like, this is what I need to do, because it touched on all of those things. That it was about binge eating and weight loss and the science of weight loss and how our thoughts and beliefs actually inform our relationship with food and with our bodies. And we're so much more than just what we eat. It's a confluence of family history, of societal messages, our thoughts and beliefs and stories, and our biology. And we're all so different, right? So the dieting culture, tries to put us in like a cookie cutter. It's like, eat carbs, don't eat carbs, eat after 6, don't eat after 6, do this and do this. And what I learned through the program was that we all have an intrinsic wisdom about how to nourish ourselves, and that we need to tap back into that and not give over our power to all these experts making us feel so confused and conflicted around food in the first place. So that's how I got into it. And I decided to leave my job after 13 years and start my own business. And it's been almost 3 years and I've never looked back. I stopped dieting myself. I got rid of the scale, and I found this like deep well of just peace and freedom that was unparalleled to anything else I'd ever experienced, really, after years and years of fighting with my body and bullying it and over-exercising and restricting calories and all the things that went along with that. I'm finally at a place where everything is calibrated and I feel really happy. And I was like, this is how I need to serve people. I want other people to feel the same experiences and the same joy that I feel in my skin now, so that's how I got into it.
That's wonderful.
Thanks.
So what are you finding are the motivations or the drives behind people overeating and emotional eating and such? I mean, I'm sure it's unique for everybody, but I'm sure there's patterns in our culture.
There's definitely patterns. And one of the stark things that I've seen time and again is what we resist persists. So in a culture where we say sugar is bad, this is good, this is clean, that's bad, we start to attribute morality from food that we attribute, that we put into food unto ourselves. So if I eat that broccoli, all of a sudden I'm virtuous, I've got a health halo on. But if I eat that Twinkie and I've been told that it's bad for you and it's evil and it's going to make you heavy and it's going to make you sick, and you eat it anyway, then what does that say about you, right? And so we get really caught up in the morality of food, when in essence, we give it more power than it really is, just by vilifying it or praising it, when in fact what we really need to realize is that food is just food. It has a different effect on our bodies. There's no morality in it, though, you know? So when people can divorce themselves of this ethical and morality issue around food and attributing that to ourselves, then all of a sudden we can move into flow about what makes our bodies feel amazing, what makes us thrive, which foods we actually love and which ones we don't. And so a perfect example of this was, I was always very triggered by Halloween candy. And every year I would like worry about this day because I know I would like get into my kids' baskets and like eat all their stuff. But when I finally became an intuitive and mindful eater, the most amazing thing happened. I would eat this food in a whole different way and bring a whole level of consciousness to it that I never did before, because I was so conflicted about eating it that I would almost dissociate altogether from the experience, right? But when I actually tuned in and gave myself permission to eat this without any morality whatsoever, or guilt or shame, or it was just a choice I was making, I realized like, I don't even like it. That was the most amazing thing of all. I was like, this isn't great. And I decided like, I deserve to eat things that are great, that taste really great, delicious, that, you know, if it's not the cleanest or the healthiest food, by God, it's going to be amazingly delicious. You know what I mean? And from that place of intrinsic wisdom and trust and communication with my body in a whole different way, I was able to just very naturally choose foods that were healthy for me, because that's what my body preferred and that's what my palate preferred ultimately. And so that's a big reason, is that we don't realize that we have this power. We don't realize we have this wisdom. And we get very caught up in all the don't have this and don't have, like if I say, don't think of an elephant right now, you're going to think of an elephant. So if I say, don't eat any sugar, don't eat any this, you're going to be obsessively thinking about it and wanting it. So that's number one. Number two is, one of the big reasons why we overeat or stress eat or binge eat is because we're using food as a surrogate for something else that we're missing in our lives, right? So, and sometimes we're not even really fully aware of what that is, but food becomes a placeholder and a groundedness for when we feel the loftiness of anxiety or panic or even existential angst. Food can actually physiologically ground us. And so it actually works. It actually does the thing that people want it to do. The problem is that afterwards, it leaves us with a sense of even more angst and more despair and more confusion and malaise in our bodies too. And then a sense of like, oh, well, here I go again. Like, I knew I couldn't do it, you know? So those two things are really prevalent. It's the idea that we're using food as a surrogate for something that we're not getting, whether it's community, spirituality, passion, relationships, intimacy, that kind of stuff, even ennui and boredom and purpose. And then the other thing is just the whole, this isn't allowed, so I want to rebel and have this anyway. Like, you're telling me not to have this? Oh, I'm going to want it. You know what I mean? So those are two big reasons. And there's a whole confluence of other reasons as well, but those are two that I see quite a bit.
Right. I want to circle back to a couple things that you said. First being, so our bodies have this wisdom, and we can tune into it in order to realize what's actually going to bring us real pleasure and nourishment. And sometimes those things overlap and sometimes they don't. But when we're doing things compulsively, it doesn't necessarily, it's often neither of those things. So I'm interested in what you think about and how you work with sometimes when the body and when our minds are so wrapped up in this other way of being and doing things compulsively, it's really uncomfortable. And so our bodies are actually sending us faulty signals about what we're hungry for and what.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like a period of not knowing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
probably. So I want to ask you about that. And then the other thing is about how our culture is actually providing us so much that's not actually food, that we're
Mm-hmm.
just inundated with advertising and stimulus and cues to eat things that do
Mm-hmm.
not make us well. So
Yes,
I'm going to leave
absolutely.
those two things in your lap and see what you have to say about that.
Yeah, those are great questions because we're all confused. We all feel like why do we drop money and time and energy into all these programs is because we feel like we don't have those answers within ourselves. And that somebody else, some Shangri-La, like there's someone who knows better, who's somebody who is an expert. And I call it kind of like it's being like a dietary detective, and to like actually take that time and space to like wait out all the noise and the muck and the experts, and really just tuning in a very profound way as to how to embody your body and how to really understand and communicate it with it in a way that honors every part of who you are. So like to address your first question, which is about I would say there's a technique that I use called stop, look, and listen, because a lot of times we're not even aware that we're in a stress response. So perfect example, before I started all this, like my kids would be fighting, and I realized that I would immediately head to the closet to get chocolate chips. Why? Because the fighting was my food cue. It was my stimulus to then follow a script that I had started many years ago. Whenever I'm under duress or stress, I crave sugar. And it's an emotional and psychological craving. It's not a physical craving. I'm not even really hungry, but the kids are fighting. It activates my amygdala, like a fight or flight response. I'm in a stress response. And all I know how to do in that moment is to grab food, because that's what's worked all those years. And when I realized, and I adopted this, what I call a stop, look, and listen technique, kids are fighting, and I actually create a stopgap in that moment to actually sit with the discomfort and the uncomfortable feelings that are coming up for me. And I can actually, instead of like following that script or that cue, I can actually enact and enable change and a different script. I can short circuit that script and activate a different one. So I stop and I'm like, okay, I'm in a stress response. How do I know? I'm feeling anxious, my heart's beating, I'm craving sugar. But after further reflection, I'm listening. I'm not hungry. This is a neck up kind of hunger. This is not a neck down hunger. And so once I recognize that, I can say, okay, what I really need to do is go upstairs to my room for like 10 minutes and calm down and take a few deep breaths and listen to some music, or go for a walk, or call my best friend and vent. But the chocolate chips, while short term might make me feel better, because it always has, it's actually creating a bigger malaise. It's a bigger angst for me, So that's number one. The other question about our food culture is, this is part of the reason why I do this work, is because our food culture and manufacturers make it very difficult for us to tune into intuitive and mindful eating, because our most of our foods are sort of infused in just the right way to activate our dopamine. It's got enough fat, sugar, and salt to create the bliss point, right, in our brains, to want more and more and more of it. And that's the whole purpose. They want people to purchase their products, right? And so, it's very easy to get caught up in that, and to recognize that there are other things that activate dopamine as well. And that natural sense of like fulfillment can come from being in nature, from intimacy. It can come from so many things. And one of the things that I do with clients is I have them create a pleasure inventory, like all the ways that they experience pleasure and joy and satisfaction and meaning that don't include food. And so that they have a growing list of things that they can turn to when they're noticing that they're getting activated by false fixes, by food. And so that's another sort of way that I help people, is to notice how our culture actually sabotages our navigation of leading a healthy lifestyle. It really does. And a lot of times people blame themselves, and I say, take that burden off of yourselves. Like, please understand how our culture plays a massive role in who we are as eaters. But you're not beholden to that. Once you are awake to it and you notice it, like, I'll bring it up and people will be like, oh my God, yeah, there was all these samples at Starbucks and I just instinctively grabbed them. Or I was at Costco and I had like 18 samples. Or I was at the bank and I wasn't expecting to eat anything and there were lollipops. So I had to take a lollipop. And, like, it's everywhere we go. You're just driving home and you're going to pass KFC. You're going to pass McDonald's. You're going to pass Dunkin' Donuts. Like, it's in our faces and our purview all the time. So we can't escape that, but we can create a safety net, if you will. We can create opportunities to understand how that food culture tries to manipulate how we eat. And then again, once we tune into like, oh wow, I actually don't like Kit Kats anymore, and I'm okay without them. I can tune into, well, what do I like? What are the foods that are going to really light me up and also be nutrient dense and fit my lifestyle? Do you know what I mean?
I do. So I received your email today about ping pong dieting, and really interesting, as opposed to the yo-yo diet, which is a totally different thing. But I used to be like this too, all or nothing. Like, I'm either on a cleanse and I'm like eating vegan and no oil and all of this stuff, and then like exercising myself into the ground, or I'm like laying on the couch watching TV, drinking wine and eating cookies,
Right.
like there's no middle ground, except that there is. And it's being mindful and like listening to what your body wants in a moment. And like, if you go for the donut, you don't have to go for the box of donuts.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we feel like, well, I think one of the reasons why we go for the whole box of donuts is because we're not savoring that one donut. Mm-hmm. So our bodies and our taste buds, and specifically there's something called sensory specific satiety, which is essentially like our taste buds actually get saturated pretty quickly when there's something very fatty or salty or sugary. And we're always chasing the high. We think, oh my gosh, this tastes amazing. And we race through it because we have so much conflict about what it, like I said before, the morality of it, that we eat it really fast. We don't savor it. We don't enjoy it. And then we keep using that same food to try to get the same high from that first one or two bites. And it never comes because our taste buds are already saturated and they're not going to need anything else for several hours. And so we try in vain to get that back over and over again, in vain, because we can't get it back. And so that, I don't know if that answers the question, but that the ping pong dieting is really about, in addition to what you said, this idea that when you restrict enough and you're used to restricting calories and denying yourself of pleasure, it's going to ricochet eventually in the other direction. So we end up with this polarity of like binging and restricting, because if we deny ourselves something for so long, that's the very thing we're going to go for when our willpower throws us under the bus. You know what I mean? So I think that ping pong dieting is very common because it's very hard. I wrote a blog post about this, 50 Shades of Gray for the black and white thinker, because we're all such like black and white thinkers, and we need to like get comfortable with all the in between. And my theory is that it has a lot to do with this feeling of being successful and what that means. And if we're not successful, then we're failures, right? And even among that polarity, there's so much in between, right? It's how you define success. And so I often look at micro wins. Like, people want these grandiose, huge, quick fixes. They're going to see massive transformations. And what I found in my work is that it's actually like lots of little micro wins along the way. And then we can look back 6 months and be like, oh my God, I've made a lot of change. And I didn't even realize it until we just processed this. Like, oh yeah, I wouldn't have done that a month ago. I wouldn't have done that 6 months ago. It's a longer path, but it's a sustainable path. And that's what I love about the work that I do. I don't promise a quick fix in any way, but there's deep soul work going on, that can really benefit people.
One of my favorite mantras is one good decision at a time.
I love that.
Decision at a time, and celebrate.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I love that so much. And there's I used to work with somebody who is in AA, he's a recovering alcoholic. And he would say, do the next best thing, dust yourself off, give yourself some compassion, We're not always going to make the choice that makes sense to us both short term and long term. And when we don't make a choice that is consistent or in alignment with our real desires and our real goals, do the next best thing. Dust yourself off. Bring compassion. What can you do next that's going to nourish your body? What can you do next that's going to make you feel good, you know?
Mm-hmm. So the title of this masterclass is Gain Clarity in Your Purpose. And can you talk a little bit about working with your clients and how the mental load of beating ourselves up and thinking about the morality of food and whether or not to do something from a mind perspective rather than feeling in the body the nourishment, how that keeps people from living their true purpose and their potential.
So this is exactly what I do, because in order for people to step into their true purpose and potential, they have to be willing to release what's not serving them anymore. And for many of us, myself included, dieting was my sole purpose. If I was not achieving or trying to achieve a smaller body, then what was the point of anything? And to release and let go of that was really hard. But when I finally let go of it, I was able to step into so much massive potential that I was just leaving on the table for years. There's no way I could have written a book if I was still obsessing about every calorie, weighing myself multiple times a day, exercising 3 hours. There's no way I could do that. There's no way I could have started a business. And I found that by letting go of that, you know, that idea that I could be this smaller body that everybody admires and that, you know, is, in my opinion, going to bring so much success and so much love and so much belonging. When I was able to let go of that, I found a true expansiveness in my life that I never even realized was possible. And I had that much more bandwidth and energy and time to nurture those things than when I was writing down every single thing I ate and worrying constantly. Oh my gosh, if I have this, does that mean I can only eat spinach for dinner? And like, oh, I better go to the gym again. And that's no way to live, you know? And I was, you know, I have 3 daughters. I didn't want them to follow the same cycle that I did. And I wanted to model for them what self-love and self-compassion and true nurturing and self-care looked like. Mm-hmm. And what they saw for a long time, up until 3 years ago, was me eating these like prepackaged meals while they were having their beautiful dinners. And I was sitting there like having this like diet shake. And all of a sudden I felt so bad for that person. For me, I was like, why would I do that to myself? I deserve to eat. I deserve to enjoy my food and to like have a real meal. Like I was literally not eating broccoli because it wasn't on my diet because I was so restricted. And so stepping into potential and purpose can only happen when you let go of what's no longer serving you in your life. And sometimes we hang on so tightly. We really believe that these things, we can't let go of them. But when you lean into what you really truly desire and want in your life, oftentimes it does mean saying goodbye to some other things, so that you can make space and it can be this capacious, beautiful place where you can nurture your true passions and desire and really give and contribute to the world in the way that you want. I love deeper. I give more. I have more I have such creativity now that was being squelched. And so that's my answer to that, is just being really recognizing what you're holding on to that no longer really serves you.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's lovely. Maybe a little something on joyful movement and what it means to actually feel joy and pleasure in your body by moving in a way that is pleasurable.
Oh, I love this topic. Yes. So I was my frenemy was the elliptical because it was both my best friend and my enemy. I like stared it in the face. I'm like, I'm going to do an hour and a half again. I'm going to be bored out of my mind. I'm going to be watching the Food Network. How ironic is that? I'd be watching like Giada, like making pasta. And I'm like, okay, someday I'll be able to eat you, you know? And I realized like, I wouldn't even explore yoga because that didn't burn enough calories. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even want to explore weight training because that wasn't enough calorie burn either. And so there was all these things that I left, like dancing didn't count, hiking didn't count. And when I had a shift in like, okay, how does my body like to move? I'm not a runner. I tried to force myself to be a runner because runners get all the accolades, right? You see on the bumper stickers that say 26.2. You don't see, hey, did an hour and a half on the elliptical. Do I get an award? No. So I started to realize, like, why am I doing something I hate and forcing myself to do it every day? When I can actually step into what my body's really craving in terms, like you said, joyful movement. And for me, it was dancing, it was yoga, it was kettlebell training, it was hiking, it was like playing Frisbee with my kids, and actually tuning into the types of things that I like to do as a child. And then I actually had I have a whole course on transforming your relationship with exercise. And one of the things that I have people do is to find something that is playful. So like jump rope, or go on a pogo stick, or play Red Rover, or do something that you Twister, something you did as a kid that really, when you see a kid move, like, they're just so happy to be in their bodies. If you see a toddler, they're like squatting and jumping on puddles and like going up and down because they're marveling in how their bodies move and how great it feels. And so I was like, I got to get the mindset of a toddler, and find these like joyful ways to move my body that works with my body mechanics, and really detach myself from the result of it and focus more on the process of it. So instead of the calorie burn, and instead of, if I do an extra 20 minutes, that means I can have an extra serving of rice, okay, or something. I'm like, how does my body feel? What feels good right now? How many minutes? I'm not going to count how many minutes because it's just going to feel natural. Whatever I decide, I'm going to trust my body instead of constantly like working against it and constantly making it wrong. You know what I mean? So that's sort of my whole shtick about exercise, is work with your body mechanics and do things that you absolutely love, and you'll never dread it ever again in your whole life.
Wonderful. Great. I think this might be a good place to stop for now, but maybe we could have another conversation again sometime and go deeper.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay, where can people find you if they want to work with you or read your book?
Great, thank you. So my book is called The Body Image Blueprint. It's available on Amazon and Kindle. And the best place to find out about my coaching services is on my website, which is www.jennyedencoaching.com.
Great. Thank you for joining me today. It was a lovely
Thank you so much, Melissa. It's been so great to talk with you.
conversation. Take care. Have a great
You
day.
too.